The sun rose over Kambuta village, painting the sky in gold and pink. Amara woke up early, her heart full of excitement and worry. Today was her wedding day. The air was filled with songs from the women outside, their voices rising in rhythm as they danced and clapped for the bride. Her mother, Mama Kasai, came into the room smiling, holding a white cloth with tiny blue beads. "My daughter," she said softly, "today you begin a new life. Daniel is a good man. You will be happy." Amara smiled and nodded. She wanted to believe her mother's words. Daniel had always been kind to her. He was a church deacon, gentle, respectful, and always ready to help anyone. When he asked her to marry him under the big mango tree near the church, she thought her prayers had been answered. The whole town loved Daniel. People called him the man of God's light. Reverend Musa, the town pastor, spoke proudly of him during Sunday sermons. "When Daniel loves, he loves in truth," he once said. Amara had felt proud that day, sitting in the front row, her hands clasped together. Now, as her friends braided her hair and wrapped her in her wedding dress, Amara tried to calm her thoughts. But a small voice inside her whispered, "Something feels strange." It wasn't fear of marriage, it was something deeper, something she couldn't name. The women laughed and joked as they prepared her. Outside, goats bleated, drums played, and the smell of roasted maize filled the air. The whole village of Kambuta was alive with joy. Children ran through the dust, shouting, "The bride is beautiful! The bride is beautiful!" By noon, Daniel arrived at the compound with his family and friends. He wore a white agbada with gold embroidery and smiled warmly as he greeted everyone. His calm voice and gentle laughter made people adore him even more. When he saw Amara, his eyes softened. "You look like a dream," he said, taking her hand. She blushed and looked away. But as their hands touched, she noticed his were cold and slightly trembling. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. He smiled quickly. "Just nervous, my love. Every man feels the weight of this moment." His words sounded right, but something in his eyes looked distant. Amara wanted to ask more, but her aunt called out, "Come, come. The pastor is waiting at the church." The wedding took place in the large white church at the center of Kambuta. The choir sang beautifully, their voices echoing through the wooden walls. Reverend Musa stood at the altar, wearing his long green robe. His face shone with joy as he welcomed everyone. "Today," he began, "we celebrate love, love that joins two souls under heaven's watch." People clapped and cheered. Daniel smiled proudly beside Amara, but when she looked at Reverend Musa, she noticed something odd. His eyes met Daniel's for a moment, a long, silent look. Then both men quickly looked away. Amara's heart skipped. She told herself it was nothing. Perhaps they were only exchanging smiles as close friends often did. Still, the feeling returned, that same whisper in her chest that told her not everything was as it seemed. When the ceremony ended, people shouted, "Long live the couple," and threw petals in the air. Drums thundered, and the celebration moved to the open square. There was dancing, laughter, and gifts from the elders. Amara smiled, but her smile felt weak, as if her heart didn't agree with her face. Later that evening, as the sky turned dark, Amara sat alone under the old baobab tree near her new home. The stars were bright, and she could hear the laughter of guests from inside. She thought about the strange glance between Daniel and Reverend Musa. Could it be nothing? She asked herself. But she remembered how Daniel had grown distant the past few weeks. Sometimes when she called, he didn't answer. Other times he said he was at the church with Reverend Musa, discussing prayers for their future. A part of her wanted to believe him. But another part, the quiet part that often turned out right, told her to stay alert. Just then her friend Lindai joined her, holding 2 cups of palm wine. "Why is the bride sitting here alone?" she teased. Amara laughed softly. "Just thinking." Lindai looked at her closely. "You are worried, Amara. I can see it in your eyes. What is it?" Amara hesitated, then said, "I don't know. Maybe I'm just nervous." Lindai nodded slowly. "Marriage can bring both joy and surprises. But remember, the truth always shows itself even if it hides behind holy faces." Her words sank deep into Amara's heart. The truth always shows itself. The drums grew louder as people called for the bride and groom to dance. Amara stood and brushed the dust from her dress. Daniel waved at her from the doorway, his smile bright but his eyes shadowed. As she walked toward him, she whispered to herself, "Whatever truth is hiding, may God show it in His time." That night, as the stars watched silently over Kambuta, Amara danced with her husband and smiled for the crowd. But inside her, a quiet storm began to form, one that would soon change everything she believed about love, trust, and faith. The days before the wedding were busy and full of joy, yet Amara could not rest. Everyone in Kambuda talked about her and Daniel. They said the wedding would be the most beautiful in years. Her mother and aunts sang happily while preparing baskets of yam, plantain, and fruit for the guests. The house smelled of food and hope. But in the middle of all the laughter, Amara's heart felt heavy. Daniel had started spending more time away from her. Whenever she asked where he was, he would say, "At the church with Reverend Musa. We are praying and planning for our future." His voice was calm and kind, but his eyes often looked tired or guilty. At first, Amara did not think much about it. Daniel was a church deacon, and Reverend Musa had always been his spiritual guide. It was normal for them to pray together before such a big step. Still, the visits became strange. Sometimes Daniel stayed late into the night. When Amara asked him why, he would only smile and say, "There are things of the spirit you cannot understand now." One evening, Amara went to the church to give him food. The air was cool and the moon shone through the clouds. She walked quietly up the path, carrying a small basket of rice and stew. As she reached the side of the church, she heard voices, Daniel and Reverend Musa. Their voices were low but tense. "I told you no one must know," Daniel said. "I understand," Reverend Musa replied quickly. "But secrets have a way of showing themselves, Daniel." Amara froze. Her hands trembled. What secret were they talking about? Before she could step closer, a light flashed near the window. She panicked and hid behind a wall. After a few minutes, Daniel came out, looking around as if to make sure no one was near. Then he locked the church door and walked away quickly. Amara waited until he was gone before leaving. Her heart beat fast all the way home. That night she could not sleep. She kept hearing those words, "No one must know." The next morning, when she asked Daniel about the late-night prayer, he smiled again. "My love," he said softly, "we are asking God to protect our marriage. You should be happy." He touched her cheek gently, but his hand felt cold. Amara forced a smile, though doubt grew inside her. She went to her friend Lindai's home later that day. Lindai was her childhood friend, bold, wise, and always honest. "Something is not right," Amara said. "Daniel keeps meeting Reverend Musa. They whisper. They hide things." Lindai frowned. "You think he is hiding something from you?" "I don't know," Amara whispered. "But when I ask, he avoids the truth." Lindai looked at her seriously. "Amara, listen to me. Before marriage, a woman must open her eyes. Love can blind you, but lies can destroy you. Watch, don't just trust blindly." Amara nodded slowly. "If I ask too many questions, people will think I don't trust him." "Then let them think that," Lindai said firmly. "Better to look foolish than to live in a lie." That night, Amara lay awake listening to the sound of drums from the nearby fields. Her heart hurt, but she prayed, asking God for a sign. She prayed for peace, but the more she prayed, the heavier her chest felt. The next day, Reverend Musa came to visit her family home. Everyone was happy to see him. He brought gifts, a Bible, a white cloth, and a bottle of palm wine. He smiled warmly as he blessed the house. But Amara noticed something strange again. When he looked at her, his smile was wide, but his eyes seemed to hide fear. When Daniel arrived later and saw Reverend Musa already there, a shadow crossed his face. "Musa, I didn't expect you today," Daniel said. Reverend Musa laughed too loudly. "I came to bless the home." "Is that a crime?" Daniel forced a laugh. "Of course not, Pastor." Their eyes met for a moment, a silent exchange that made Amara's stomach twist. It was the same look she had seen between them at the wedding rehearsal, a look filled with something unspoken. After Reverend Musa left, Amara turned to Daniel. "You seem uncomfortable when he visits," she said gently. Daniel shook his head. "No, my love. He just worries too much about us. That is all." He kissed her forehead and left soon after, saying he had to help the pastor with evening prayers. Amara stood by the doorway watching him leave, his tall figure fading into the shadows. A breeze passed and she shivered though the night was warm. 3 days before the wedding, Lindai came again. "Have you found peace?" she asked. Amara shook her head. "No. The more I look, the less I understand." "Then do nothing," Lindai said softly. "Let the truth come by itself. It always does." Amara tried to follow her advice. She smiled through the final wedding preparations, pretending everything was fine. She laughed when people teased her, danced when the drums played, and prayed when her mother asked her to. But inside, her heart was restless. One afternoon, as she went to deliver flowers to the church, she saw Reverend Musa locking the door again. His hands shook slightly. When he turned and saw her, he smiled too quickly. "Ah, Sister Amara," he said. "You are early for your prayers." "Yes, Pastor," she said softly. "I brought flowers for the altar." He took them from her and placed them on the table, his eyes avoiding hers. "God bless you, my daughter. The wedding will be perfect. Daniel and I have been praying for you both." When she looked closer, she saw a small paper peeking from under the Bible on the altar. It had Daniel's handwriting on it. Reverend Musa noticed her eyes and quickly covered it with his hand. Amara said nothing. She only smiled politely and left. That night she told Lindau what happened. Lindau sighed. "The signs are there, Amara. But sometimes God waits for the right moment to show the truth." Amara nodded. "I just want peace. I don't want to ruin everything." Lindau placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then be patient. The truth is like the morning sun, it cannot hide forever." The night before the wedding, Amara knelt by her bed and prayed again. She asked for strength, for clarity, for courage to face whatever was coming. Outside, the wind blew softly, carrying the scent of rain and change. As she closed her eyes, she felt a strange calm, not peace but readiness. Deep inside, she knew that something would happen soon. Something that would answer all her questions even if it broke her heart. And when the morning came, the first light touched her face gently as if to whisper, "The time has come to see what is hidden." The morning sun rose softly over Kambuda, lighting the sky with pale gold. Birds sang in the mango trees, and the village was already awake, buzzing with excitement. It was Amara's wedding day, the day everyone had waited for. Drums echoed from the square, women sang, and the air was filled with joy. But Amara's heart was restless. Inside her room, she stood before the mirror, her white dress shining in the sunlight. Her mother helped fix her necklace and said proudly, "You will be the most beautiful bride in Kambuda." Amara smiled, though her thoughts were far away. Her hands trembled slightly. She tried to calm herself by whispering a prayer. Suddenly her younger cousin ran in. "Sister Amara," she said, "your veil is missing. I think it was left at Daniel's house after yesterday's rehearsal." Amara's heart skipped. The veil was special, a family heirloom passed down from her grandmother. She could not marry without it. "I'll go and get it myself," she said quickly. Her mother tried to stop her, but Amara smiled. "I'll be quick. No one will even notice I'm gone." She took a shawl and quietly slipped out, her sandals kicking up dust as she walked down the narrow path to Daniel's home. The streets were mostly empty because everyone was at the church preparing for the big event. When she reached Daniel's compound, she noticed the gate was slightly open. She stepped in quietly, planning to enter, grab her veil and leave. But as she neared the door, she froze. Voices. Daniel's voice, low and anxious. And another voice, Reverend Musa's. Her heart began to beat fast. She stepped closer to the open window, hidden behind the curtains that moved slightly with the wind. "You promised me, Daniel," Reverend Musa said, his voice sharp. "You said once the wedding is done, everything would end." Daniel's reply came quickly. "I know, Musa. But she's starting to suspect something. She hears things, she sees things." Amara's hand flew to her mouth. They were talking about her. Reverend Musa sighed. "Then maybe we should stop this before it destroys us both." Daniel's tone grew desperate. "You think I can stop now? The whole town sees me as a man of God. You, the pastor, have blessed this marriage. If the truth comes out, we both lose everything." There was silence, then Musa said quietly, "Secrets built on lies never stand." Amara's body went cold. Her mind tried to make sense of their words. What truth? What secret? She leaned closer, her breath shallow. Daniel continued, "You know why I agreed to this, Musa? It was never love, it was fear. You said if I didn't help you, you would ruin me." Musa's voice trembled. "You think you're the only one trapped? We both made mistakes, Daniel. But using Amara, marrying her just to cover up our secret, that's wrong." The world around Amara seemed to stop. The sound of the wind, the singing birds, even her heartbeat, everything felt distant. She stepped back, her foot hitting a small stone. It rolled and made a soft sound. Inside, Daniel paused. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Amara panicked. She quickly hid behind the wall, breathing hard. Her mind was spinning. The truth was now clear. The men she trusted most, her husband-to-be and her pastor, had betrayed her faith and her heart. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to scream, but no voice came out. Instead, she slowly walked away, her steps weak and shaky. By the time she reached the road, her face was pale. The singing from the church grew louder in the distance. People were waiting for her, the smiling bride who was supposed to walk down the aisle in joy. But she could barely stand. She stopped under a tree holding her chest. She felt like the ground beneath her had disappeared. Her whole life, her love, her faith, her dreams had been built on lies. After a few minutes, she forced herself to keep walking. She could not let the villagers see her like this. She wiped her tears and tried to steady her breathing. When she reached home, her mother ran to her. "My daughter, where were you? Everyone is waiting." Amara smiled faintly. "I found the veil." Her voice was quiet, almost breaking. She handed it to her mother and went inside. In the small room, she sat on the bed, staring at the floor. Lindiwe entered soon after, her face bright with excitement. "Amara, it's time. The church is full." Daniel looks nervous but happy. Amara lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were red. Lindiwe's smile faded. "What happened?" Amara hesitated, then whispered, "I know the truth now." Lindiwe knelt beside her. "What truth?" Amara took a deep breath. "Daniel and Reverend Musa. They have been hiding something terrible. I heard them talking. They used me. Everything was a lie." Lindiwe's eyes widened. "Oh, Amara," she held her friend tightly. "What will you do?" Amara closed her eyes. "I don't know yet. But I will not stand before God and marry a man who hides darkness behind holy words." Her voice trembled but carried strength. Outside, people were calling for the bride. The drums had started again, and the pastor was already waiting at the altar, the same man who had betrayed her. Lindiwe looked at her and said softly, "You are strong, Amara. Don't let their lies break your spirit. Whatever happens, stand with truth." Amara nodded. She stood and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was not the same one who had woken up that morning. Her eyes no longer held the same innocence. They carried pain and courage. She put on her veil, her hands steady now. The noise outside grew louder. Her mother called her name again. Amara walked to the door and paused. She took one last deep breath and whispered, "Let the truth be seen." Then she stepped out, the sun shining on her white dress. The people cheered, but she did not smile. She was walking not into a wedding, but into a moment that would change everything. For her, for Daniel, and for Reverend Musa. The secret that had been whispered in darkness was about to face the light. The church of Kambuda was shining that morning. The windows were open and sunlight poured through, lighting the white flowers and the ribbons that hung from the wooden beams. Drums beat softly outside, and women sang wedding songs that filled the air with joy. People smiled, whispering to each other, "Today is the day. The teacher and the deacon will become one." Inside, Daniel stood at the altar, dressed in white. He looked calm, but his hands shook slightly as he fixed his sleeves. The church was packed with friends, family, and elders. Everyone waited for the bride. Reverend Musa stood nearby, holding the Bible, his face serious. When Amara entered, the crowd gasped softly. She looked beautiful, her white gown simple but glowing, her veil floating behind her like a soft cloud. Children smiled, women clapped, and her mother wiped away tears of pride. But Amara's steps were slow. Her heart was heavy. She could still hear the words she had overheard that morning at Daniel's house. The secret that both men had hidden was like a wound inside her. Yet, as she walked down the aisle, she looked calm. No one could guess that behind her quiet eyes, a storm was waiting. When she reached the front, Daniel took her hand gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. She didn't reply. She only looked at him, a long, steady look that made him shift nervously. Reverend Musa began to speak. His voice was strong, but there was tension beneath it. "We are gathered here to join this man and this woman in holy marriage. May their love be true, may their hearts be clean before God." Amara's eyes lifted toward him. The same man who spoke about clean hearts had stood in the shadows of deceit. He did not meet her gaze. The ceremony went on. People smiled, the choir sang, and the sound of drums outside continued softly. But inside, Amara felt time slow down. Her mother's joyful face blurred in the distance. Daniel's hand felt heavy in hers. Then came the final moment, the vow. Reverend Musa raised the Bible. His voice trembled slightly. "Amara Kesai, do you take Daniel Cato to be your husband, to love and to cherish till death do you part?" Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Amara took a deep breath. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was clear. "No." The word cut through the room like a knife. The drums outside stopped. The choir fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Reverend Musa blinked, unsure he had heard right. "My daughter, perhaps you did not hear the question?" Amara lifted her head. Her veil shimmered as she spoke again, louder this time. "I said no. I cannot marry a man who hides truth behind holy words." Gasps filled the air. People turned to each other in shock. Daniel's face went pale. He opened his mouth but said nothing. "What are you saying?" he whispered. Amara looked straight into his eyes. "You know what I'm saying, Daniel? I know your secret. I know the lies that live between you and this man of God." Her words echoed through the hall. Reverend Moose's hands trembled. The Bible slipped slightly from his grip. "Amara," he said softly, "this is not the place." "This is the only place," she said. Her voice was firm now. "This is where truth must live. You both preached about honesty, about faith and purity, but your hearts were filled with shadows." The church was silent. The guests stared, some confused, others whispering. Daniel fell to his knees. "Please, Amara," he said weakly. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," she replied. "You stood beside me, smiling while your soul was tied to lies. I would rather walk alone than live beside deceit." Her mother began to cry softly, not out of shame, but out of sorrow for her daughter's pain. Linda stood at the back, her face calm but proud. Daniel looked at Reverend Musa desperately. "Say something. Tell them the truth." Reverend Musa took a deep breath. He looked at Amara, then at the crowd. "There is nothing more to say," he murmured. Then, slowly he closed the Bible. "A union without truth cannot stand before God." With that, he turned and began to walk down the aisle. The sound of his robe brushing against the floor was the only sound in the church. Everyone watched as the pastor left, the man they had trusted, the man who had blessed so many weddings before. Amara stood tall, though her heart was breaking. She turned to the crowd and said softly, "I am not ashamed. I am not broken. I only choose truth." Then she walked out, her veil flowing behind her like a banner of courage. Outside the air was cool and quiet. The songs had stopped and people gathered in silence. Amara stepped into the sunlight, closing her eyes for a moment. She felt the wind on her face, gentle and freeing. Behind her, she heard Daniel calling her name, but she didn't turn back. Some of the villagers followed her, whispering words of support. Others stayed behind, too shocked to speak. As she walked home, she thought of everything. Her dreams, her faith, her love, all shattered in one morning. But even through the pain she felt something new, peace. Linda caught up to her halfway down the road. "Amara," she said softly, "you were brave." Amara smiled faintly. "I didn't want to be brave. I just wanted the truth." Linda nodded. "And now you have it." They walked together in silence as the wind carried away the sound of the church bells. That evening the sun set slowly over Kambuda. The news spread quickly. The wedding that never happened, the bride who chose truth over shame. Some people judged her, others praised her, but Amara didn't care. She sat quietly under the baobab tree, the same place where Daniel had once proposed. The leaves rustled softly above her. She whispered to herself, "A lie can wear a holy robe, but it can never hide from God." And as the last light faded from the sky, Amara felt tears fall, not of sorrow this time but of release. She was free. Months passed after the broken wedding in Kambuda. The story of Amara spread through the town like wind through tall grass. Some people whispered about her bravery, others spoke with pity, and a few still blamed her for ending what they called a perfect union. But Amara no longer cared what they said. She had walked through pain and now she walked toward peace. At first life was quiet. She returned to her small house near the edge of the village, where the air smelled of dust and mango trees. Every morning she swept the compound, watered her flowers and watched the sunrise. It was not an easy peace. There were nights she cried, remembering Daniel's smile, and days she wondered why God had chosen such a hard path for her. But slowly her heart began to heal. Linda visited often. She would bring roasted groundnuts and stories from the market. "People still talk about you," she said one afternoon, sitting under the shade of the baobab tree. Amara smiled softly. "Let them talk. I hope they learn something from it." Linda nodded. "They say you are brave. They say you stood against lies and didn't run away." Amara looked into the distance. Bravery is not shouting or fighting. Sometimes it is just standing still when your world is falling apart. Her words touched Linda deeply. A few weeks later, a young woman came to visit Amara. Her name was Halima, and her eyes were swollen from crying. "I heard what you did," she said quietly. "My husband hurt me too, not with his hands but with lies. People tell me to forgive and forget, but my heart is heavy. How did you find peace?" Amara took her hand gently. "Peace doesn't come in a day," she said. "It comes when you decide to stop blaming yourself. Pain doesn't end your story, it shapes your strength." Halima nodded slowly, tears still falling. After that day more women began to come. Some were wives, some were daughters, and some were young girls afraid of what life might bring. They came to sit under the same tree where Amara once cried alone. She would listen to them, pray with them, and remind them that betrayal was not the end. Word spread quickly through Kambuda that Amara had started something special. A small counseling group where women could speak without shame. They called it the Circle of Hope. Every Sunday afternoon, women gathered under the tree. They shared stories, wept, and laughed together. Sometimes older women brought food and told tales of how they survived hard marriages. Sometimes young girls came just to listen. Amara would always begin by saying, "We are not broken. We are only learning how to stand again." Her strength amazed everyone. Even those who had once mocked her began to show respect. The chief's wife, Mama Nyoka, once visited her and said, "My daughter, you have done what no one else could, turned your pain into healing for others." Amara bowed her head humbly. "It was God, not me," she said. "He used my tears to water the seeds of hope." One morning as she prepared tea, a letter arrived. It was from Reverend Musa. He had left Kambuda months ago after the scandal. The letter was long and full of apology. He wrote, "I was lost in pride and fear. You had the courage to speak the truth that I could not. I live now in silence, asking God to forgive me. I pray that you find joy again." Amara read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside her Bible. She whispered, "I forgave you long ago." Later that evening she walked to the riverbank and watched the water flow. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She thought about everything, the laughter of her past, the pain of betrayal, and the peace she now carried. Daniel had left the village soon after the wedding. No one knew where he went. Sometimes people asked if she missed him. She would smile gently and say, "No. I pray he finds truth just as I did." Life in Kambuda slowly returned to normal. The songs, the market, the laughter, all returned. But something had changed in the hearts of the people. They spoke more kindly, judged less, and began to see women differently. One afternoon the schoolteacher fell sick, and the village elders asked Amara to teach for a while. She accepted happily. Standing before the children, she felt alive again. She taught them not only reading and numbers, but also lessons about honesty and kindness. During one class, a little girl raised her hand. "Teacher Amara," she asked, "why did you not marry if you loved Daniel?" The question made the children giggle, but Amara smiled. "Because love without truth is like a flower without roots," she said. "It looks pretty for a while, but it cannot live long." The children nodded thoughtfully, and Amara knew her heart had healed at last. As months turned into a year, her small counseling group grew. Women from other villages began to visit. Some came just to sit under the baobab tree, where Amara still held her meetings. They said the tree had become a place of peace, a place where broken hearts could breathe again. One day as the women talked and shared laughter, Lindai looked at her friend and said, "Do you see what you've built, Amara? You turned your pain into light for others." Amara smiled, her eyes soft and full of gratitude. "Maybe that was the reason for it all," she said. "Sometimes God breaks what is false so he can build what is true." That evening, as the last woman left, Amara sat alone under the tree. The sky above was full of stars and a cool wind passed through the leaves. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks, not for what she lost but for what she gained. The river nearby shimmered in the moonlight, and somewhere in the distance, children laughed. Life had moved on, and so had she. Amara smiled and whispered to herself, "Pain tried to destroy me, but it only taught me how to live again." And as the night spread over Kambuda, the woman who once walked away from the altar now stood tall in peace. Her heart healed, her spirit free, and her name forever remembered as the bride who chose truth over shame.